So this video is all about the top MBA entrance exams in India. So here we are going to talk about CAT, XAT, SNAP, NMAT and CET. So common admission test, we call it the golden standard. Automatically it is an unanimous decision that they take. Now if you look at the sections over here, CAT comes in 3 sections. The first one is called as VARC, verbal ability and reading comprehension. All these 5 tests you can take them in your final year of UG. For XAT and for NMAT, there is no minimum percentage requirement, but then a few colleges do shortlist you based on your UG score. Hey folks, I guess your prep for MBA is going in a very nice, smooth fashion. And every time we go in a smooth flow, a rough patch of questions hit our head. So we start thinking about when does the registration start, when does which exam happen, what are the sections that I have to prepare for. These are one bunch of questions that we have in our head. So I thought might as well we'll answer all these questions. We'll gather all the answers, put together in a video and give it to you as one package so that you don't have to waste time for looking for all these answers. So this video is all about the top MBA entrance exams in India. I'm going to carve out a few of them and then we're going to talk about it. So I'm going to have a bunch of tests here. We're going to talk about CAT, XAT, SNAP, NMAT and CET. I picked out a few and we're going to talk about that. So to begin with, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather should we say the cat in the room. I'm going to start with CAT. So common admission test, we call it the golden standard. Well, there's a simple reason behind that is, this is the test that you need to write to get into IIMs. And with CAT score, you can quite literally get into a lot of B schools. Anyone who's thinking about an MBA in India starts thinking about CAT first. There are other tests, but CAT happens to come automatically. It is an unanimous decision that they take. So if you look at the test happens every November and it happens on the last Sunday of the November. And if you look at when does the registration begin, it typically starts in the last week of July or the first week of August and goes as much as into September. So you'll have typically you'll have a 7 to 8 weeks of registration period where you can fill up for the form. Now, if you look at the sections over here, CAT comes in 3 sections. The first one is called as VARC, verbal ability and reading comprehension, data interpretation and logical reasoning, DILR, and quantitative aptitude, QA. So it's simply going to be English, logical, and quant. The number of questions happen to be 24, 22, and 22, whereas the time allotment will be 40 minutes each section. So you're looking at a 120 minutes test, which is 2 hours. Now, CAT does not give you the leverage of switching sections nor closing a section. So you have to go in an order. You start with VARC, then you come to DILR, then you come to quant, and you'll have to spend the entire 40 minutes in a section. You cannot skip it. You cannot submit a section and then move to the next one. Whereas if you look at the marking scheme here, you are looking at +3 for a right answer, -1 for a wrong answer, and then you don't get penalized for not attempting a question. But in CAT, you have a type of question called theta. We call it the type in the answer, which is a fill in the blank type of question. You get that incorrect, you don't get penalized for it. +3 for a theta question, but you don't get -1 when you get it wrong. Now, this is about CAT. When you go to SAT, XAT, Xavier aptitude test, it's conducted by XLRI Jamshedpur. Now, once again, this test happens on the first Sunday of Jan. You have a 5-week time frame from CAT to SAT. And then the registration again starts somewhere in July and then goes till again September, the first week of October. You get a larger time period now. And then if you look at the sections in SAT, you happen to get 4 of them: verbal ability and logical reasoning, VALR, quantitative aptitude and data interpretation, QADI, business decision making, we call it BDM, and then GK. The number of questions happen to be 26, 28, 21 and 25. Now the total time is 180 minutes. Now this test is split into 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is the first 3 sections, VALR, QADI and BDM, whereas the last 10 minutes is for GK. So part 1 is 170 minutes, part 2 is 10 minutes. That's a total of 180 minutes in the test. When it comes to XAT, you can switch between sections. There is no particular order that you need to follow. You can start with QADI, then go to VALR, then go to BDM, or start with VALR, then go to QADI. You can do that. And there is no specific time frame for each section. In fact, if you want, you can spend all 170 minutes in one section, which I know we don't do that. That's not a good option to take, right? So you can choose between the timings. You can split it out around to your convenience. Whereas you look at the marking scheme here, you get +1 for a right answer, minus a quarter, 0.25 for a wrong answer, and then minus 0.1 for unattempted, not from the word go. So you are given a chance of not attempting 8 questions. Until 8 questions, you don't get penalized. From the 9th question, if you skip every question, you get minus 0.1. So that's the pattern. So you can unanswer 8 questions. You don't have to attempt 8 questions if you want. But from the 9th question, there is a penalized mark for every unattempted question, which is 0.1. So that's all about XAT. Now the difficulty of XAT is again moderate to difficult, but then XAT is slightly easier than CAT. For most people, they find CAT to be trickier than XAT. The time duration is also slightly more. So people who prepare for CAT, if it doesn't go well for them, they rely on XAT scores now. So moderate or difficult, but then still slightly lesser than CAT. Now, when you look at the next test, which is NMAT, Narsi-Munji Aptitude test conducted by NMIMS. This test is conducted by GMAC, which again conducts GMAT. So same thing. The one idea about this test is it is the most flexible test. 2, it is an adaptive test. We'll talk about this. Now, what do I mean by saying it's the most flexible test? Now, the exam date is something that you can choose. You can choose a date between October to December. They will give you a window of 75 to 90 days typically. You can pick and choose which date you want to go and write the test here. And the application typically starts somewhere around August again. If you look at the sections here, you get 3 sections: language skills, quantitative skills, and logical reasoning. And the number of questions happen to be 36 each. And if you look at the timing, language skills 28 minutes, quantitative skills 52 minutes, and then logical reasoning 40 minutes. That's again 120 minutes. But the one advantage with NMAT is that you can choose which section you want to attempt first, but you'll have to sit through the entire time. For example, if you want to start with language skills, you can choose language skills first, but you'll have to spend the entire 28 minutes there. You cannot submit and then move on to the next one. If you start with quant, spend 52 minutes, then choose logical, then choose language skills, it works. Right. Now, when it comes to the marking scheme here, a lot of people get confused that, hey, +1 or +3, there's a range here. This test is adaptive. What do you mean by an adaptive test? For every right answer that you get, the level of difficulty of the next question increases. So there is no standard value for each correct answer. There's no fixed mark for every question because the difficulty of every other question is different. You get it incorrect, you stay in the same difficulty. You get it right, you go to the next difficulty. So that's why NMAT scores, the total score is 360. Your score is given out of 360, but there is no fixed right marks for every correct answer that you get. Now, if you jump to SNAP is conducted by Symbiosis. Now, this test is a speed-based test. Now, why do I say it's a speed-based test? Now, the test happens in 3 attempts. The exam happens in December, but you get 3 attempts. The first one is your main attempt, and then you have 2 other attempts. Now, if you feel like your first attempt did not go well, something did not go well on the day, you were sick, you couldn't prepare well, and something fell off and you weren't able to give your best, you can give 2 other attempts in the same month in December, and you can choose the best of 3 scores for your application. For your admissions, you can choose one of the 3 scores and then you can go with that. Now, once again, the application starts somewhere around August. All these tests typically happen somewhere around in August here. And then if you look at the sections here, you again get 3 sections. General English, analytical and logical reasoning, and quantitative DI, data sufficiency, DIDS. The number of questions happen to be 15, 25 and 20. The total time is 60 minutes. Now notice this, the total questions is 60. The total time is 60. You have to attempt 60 questions in 60 minutes now. You have to be a little faster than the other exams. The other tests gave you more time to to sit with the question, but here you don't get that much time. So you'll have to plan accordingly. It's a speed-based test now. Now, if you look at the marking scheme here, +1 for a correct answer, -0.25 for a wrong answer, and -0 for unattempted answer. So that you don't get penalized for not answering a question. You'll have to remember that. Now the next test, MAH-CET. Now all the other 4 tests, they happen to be a national level test. But when I talk about MAH-CET, it's a state level test conducted by Maharashtra. The Maharashtra CET, common entrance test for MBA. This is conducted by Maharashtra. But the reason why I've added this over here is that one of the largest test taking, state level test taking metric happens over here. Right? So 1.5 lakh students write MAH-CET every year. So I thought might as well we'll have this over here. Now, once again, the exam happens in April. You get 2 attempts. First attempt happens in April. The next attempt happens in May. Now, the registration starts in somewhere around January, but then you get until February to register for the test. Looking at the pattern here, you get 4 sections: logical reasoning, abstract reasoning, quantitative aptitude, verbal ability, and reading comprehension. If you look at all the tests, the sections are one and the same: quant, logical, verbal, with different names, with different number of questions. Strategies differ, but the syllabus and the conceptual ideas remain the same. The number of questions happen to be 75 for logical, 25 for abstract, 50 for quant, and 50 for VARC. That's a total of 200 questions, and you have to solve it in 150 minutes. Again, this is also a speed-based test. You'll have to prepare accordingly when you go for this test. The marking scheme, once again, you get +1 for a right answer. You don't get any marks deducted for wrong or unattempted question. So that you'll have to keep in mind. Of the 5 tests that we saw, so as far as eligibility criteria goes, for CAT, for SNAP, and for MAH-CET, you need a minimum of 50% in your UG. All these 5 tests, you can take them in your final year of UG. For XAT and for NMAT, there is no minimum percentage requirement. But then a few colleges do shortlist you based on your UG scores. That is something that you'll have to keep in your head while preparing for these tests. So consolidating all these data, there it is. So know when your registration starts, when does it end, when does the test happen, so that you can be a little ahead of time and then plan accordingly. So every official information will be given out in their website. So do check them out every time there's a notification, and they are pretty much prompt when there's a notification. So have a look at all of this. Let's ensure that it goes even better from now on. All the best.